Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show, and welcoming him in as my co-pilot once again, a member of the LettermenRow.com crack staff. He's on on3.com. Spencer Holbrook, welcome back to the Tim May Show.
Always good to be here, Tim.
Okay, first I thought you weren't going to say anything, and this is not a mime show. This is a mind show, mind bending. But dude, I mean, if you take a deep breath, even though it was 92 degrees here in Columbus today as we're filming this, recording this, you can smell autumn in the air, man. It's right around the corner. As we record this, it's 12 days to Ohio State's kickoff at the Indiana University. And Ohio State yet without a named starting quarterback, which doesn't bother me much, but seems to bother a lot of people. But you can sense football season's right around the corner, right?
Yeah, there's a sense of excitement, a sense of eagerness. I think there's a sense of anxiety with the Ohio State fan base. So that must mean football's back. It's in my favorite annual tradition is Ohio State fans working themselves up, maybe a little too much. But they allow us to do what we do for a living, right, Tim? So
Yep.
can't complain too much, and love that football season is, it's here almost.
Yeah. As you described it, I mean, I think systems are normal when it comes to the Ohio State fan base. I mean, there's got to be something going on that they're maybe not feeling good about at this point in a preseason camp. And, it's funny because my guest this week is an interview I did with Mick Marotti, Ohio State's well-known, much ballyhooed strength and conditioning coordinator. He has some kind of more hyper type of title that he goes by. But bottom line is he's one of the best in the business, has been for a while now. And we talk about dealing with the heat of August. We talk about things that Ohio State has in place to keep these guys as safe as possible, to monitor their nutrition height, their hydration height, right on down the line. I mean, they've got all kinds of things going. He doesn't just tell guys to pick up 120 pounds and curl it with one arm. There's a lot more to Mickey Marotti and his staff than that. But we'll get to that in a minute. But this has been it's been an interesting preseason camp for Ohio State, the number 3 team in the country, by the way. What has just stood out to you besides Ryan Day not quite ready as we record this, not quite ready to name a starting quarterback? What's one other thing that stood out to you about this camp?
Yeah, I think it's just a competition, Tim, right? Like Ryan Day, we saw it in training in spring camp where everything was a point total, and the offense and defense, maybe a little bit of fudgery with the numbers to try to get it to be a last second thing at that spring practice that we watched at Student Appreciation Day. The offense has to get the ball down the field and score, or the defense wins practice. I don't know if I completely buy that, but everything was charted, and the point totals were, very absolute and trying to get the competition. And that's where they picked up in training camp, is exactly there with that competition. I think it's interesting that they've done that, and I think that dribbles over into the quarterback battle. I asked Ryan Day if that has anything to do with the fact that he hasn't named a starter, and he said no, because of course he did. But it can't hurt that you've preached competition all offseason, and now your quarterback competition with just 12 days until kickoff, you're still in the middle of that because you want to see what each of these guys bring. The offensive line, you don't really want to set them in stone because you want to keep seeing the competition go to see if there's a guy that can emerge late. Like, I think that's the biggest thing for me, is just the competition level that they're preaching right now. It's not how can we get prepared to win a national championship. It's how can I beat the defense every day? How can I get the better of Marvin Harrison Jr.? How can I, beat Denzel Burke on a route? How can I beat Ty Hamilton in a one-on-one if I'm a guard? Everything has been a competition, and I think that is a little bit back to the Urban Meyer playbook that won this program national title.
I agree 100%. It has been a step back. They didn't declare it as such, but all you have to do is hear the buzzwords, and competition is the main one of those. Win or loser. Win or loser is the other buzz, or is another buzzword that was used much during the Urban Meyer era that he ushered in when he showed up in 2012. And I agree. And here's the other thing. Cal McCord was considered one of the elite quarterback prospects in the country when he signed with Ohio State 3 years ago. Devin Brown was considered one of the elite, if not in some respect, in some rankings, maybe the top quarterback prospect 2 years ago when he signed with Ohio State. Why is everybody surprised that this might be at this moment a dead heat as they head into the last week and a half of camp before the season opener at Indiana?
I don't
Right,
know.
exactly.
According to the people who pay our bills, Tim, and they're pretty good at this stuff, the
Yeah.
folks, Charles Power and On3, Kyle McCord was the number 19 overall player and the number 4 quarterback in America in his recruiting class 2021. That's a class that includes Quinn Ewers. It includes J.J. McCarthy, some of the quarterbacks who are the best in the country going into this year. McCord was ranked higher or just as high as those guys. Devin Brown was according to On3, was the number 1 overall player, not quarterback, but player in the 2022 recruiting class. Now, that has a lot to do with the fact that Quinn Ewers reclassified into the 2021 class and was the number 1 player there.
Hey, but okay. So Devin Brown's number 2, if you figure that in. Go ahead now.
Both top 20 overall, 5-star, cannot miss prospects.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing, Tim, is can't miss prospects. Now there can't miss players. I think Ryan Day truly feels like if he had to start either one of these guys, he could. And this is almost a situation where you don't want to be the one to break one of their hearts because they're both really good players. And the likelihood that you could lose one of them if you don't pick them, that cannot be easy. And that shouldn't go into the equation, but it has to because Ryan Day says it. You have to do what's best for Ohio State. Well, what's best for Ohio State now and what's best for Ohio State down the road have to both factor into that. Yeah. And so how do you best manage this battle between two titans? I mean, we haven't seen Kyle McCord in big time game action. We haven't seen Devin Brown throw a single pass, but these two are as heavyweight as they come as 5-star prospects. Every other program in the country would love to have either of these guys, let alone both of them. And so I think that's where this competition gets really juicy, is like 2 5-star great players just duking it out every day in camp. And, we get to have a front row seat to a little bit of it. Ryan Day gets the front row seat to it, and he gets to see how these guys react. And I think that's the big thing, is like Ohio State fans should trust both of these guys. The tribalism that has erupted here in the last 10 or so days between Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, I think it just needs to subside and just let this play out, because either of these guys, no matter who he picks, Ryan Day that is, I think the program's going to be in pretty good hands.
Yeah, and the other thing, Ryan Day should not feel the only pressure Ryan Day is feeling right now is 3:38 p.m. Central Time on Eastern. What is wrong with me? 3:38 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time on September the 2nd at Indiana. One of those guys has got to trot out onto the field as a starter. That's the clock that's ticking. That doesn't mean that necessarily Ryan Day has made up his mind this is the guy for the rest of the year, but they do have to put a starting quarterback out there unless they run some kind of a razzle-dazzle kind of action with all those running backs they've got. But that's another story. I digress, of course. But the bottom line is you and I have talked about this many times. The analogy we keep using is a big-time race car or a big-time sports car. That's what this quarterback is stepping into with the keys in hand as soon as he is named. From a weapon standpoint, I can't remember Ohio State ever being deeper. Yeah, they've had some maybe better individual players at certain positions in the skill spots, although Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, is going to quickly erase any doubt. He's the best wide receiver in Ohio State history from just a pure talent standpoint. That's a lot of people. We'll get to that, on some other podcast. But the bottom line is they're going to get the keys to a major vehicle that's ready to run a race, because I think the most important thing that's come out of preseason camp is I don't think they feel solid. I think they feel really good about the offensive line they've come up with Josh Simmons, the transfer from San Diego State, just winning that job at left tackle, it does appear. And then to flip back over to the right side to Josh Fryer, who was expected to be the left tackle when spring and all through spring he was expected to be that going into camp. But sometimes things play out the way they need to. And Josh Fryer is back on the right side. He's going to be the starting right tackle, which I thought was the number one spot they had to get figured out in preseason camp. And it looks like Carson Hinsman is going to be the center. And from everything we're hearing from the people who've watched practice, the people who've gone against these guys, this is a pretty damn good offensive line. Agreed?
Yeah, I think the interior is where obviously it all starts, but the tackles, you probably feel good about Josh Fryer. Josh Simmons, I think, is the wild card. He's athletic. I think he's the most athletic tackle Ohio State has had, and I think that includes Paris. I think Paris Johnson's a great athlete, but Josh Simmons is a really good athlete. He might be as athletic. I thought Brandon Bowen was really athletic in 2019, and he was a decent tackle. He wasn't, an NFL draft pick. He wasn't a guy who was going to wow scouts at the combine, but he was athletic enough to get the job done on one side of a good offensive line in 2019. I don't know why Josh Simmons can't be that for this team in 2023. Josh Fryer is amusing to me because he can just great roads. And if you need a first down, I would just run to that right side with Matthew Jones and Josh Fryer and let Carson Hinsman settle in there. If you need a first down, you run right there to Donovan Jackson at that left guard spot and let Josh Simmons develop. I don't think you have to have a finished product with him in the Indiana game. I don't even know if you have to have a finished product with him in the Notre Dame game. Seeing the reports out of South Bend say that Javonte Jean-Baptiste and a couple other guys are taking those first team reps, that doesn't intimidate me if I'm starting a tackle with San Diego State playing experience. If I was starting a tackle who had no playing experience, maybe. But this line to me is low floor, high ceiling. High ceiling, it can help you win a national title. Low floor, I think it's going to struggle against the worst or the best of the best on this schedule, the Chop Robinsons from Penn State, the whoever Michigan throws at you, the Mason Grahams, wherever he lines up, the guys at Georgia, Michael Williams, playmakers like that are going to give this line maybe a couple fits. But overall, Ohio State can do things because it trusts Josh Fryer on that right side to mitigate things with Josh Simmons, let him settle in and let him grow into that role. And by the time October 21st rolls around, when you really need him against Penn State, then he's ready for that action because, he's got 5 or 6 games of experience at Ohio State under his belt. I like this line, the way it's coming together, but I still really would like to see it. Luckily for us, Tim, I don't mean to be long-winded, they get Indiana first, and Tom Allen's going to throw everything at him.
I know. I've been warning's not the right term. I've been telling people that forever. I said, this is, everybody's kind of has looked at this, these games leading up to Notre Dame. And I go, number one, Indiana, Tom Allen has nothing to lose. He's a little bit of a wild card when it comes to defense. He will try anything defensively. He's going to test a offensive line with 3 new starters on it and a brand new starting quarterback. He's going to come after him. It. If he doesn't, well, then shame on him. You know what I mean? And then, of course, 2 games later, Western Kentucky had the number 1 passing offense in the country last year. Is this defense ready for prime time? Even though that won't be in prime. No, that game's not in prime time. Yeah. No. I don't know why I brought that up, but is this defense ready for prime time? Has it gotten things figured out, especially in the pass defense, big play area? You're going to find out in a heartbeat when Austin Reed shows up in Ohio Stadium and starts throwing the ball. And that's before you ever get to the game at Notre Dame. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going into any of these games, even the Indiana game, and you need to find a ticket and find it fast, if you put it off, if you procrastinated, or if you just want to plan ahead too, gametime.co, the Game Time app, they can get you in, man. They can find that ticket. All I got to do is call up the Game Time app and search for the game or the concert or the comedy show, whatever it is you're searching, whatever it is you'd like to go to, gametime.co and the Game Time app can get you there. Like right now, just on my screen, I've got Penn State at Ohio State, October the 21st, time to be determined. $173 right now, get-in price for one of the prime games on the national schedule. Forget about Ohio State's home schedule or forget about the Big Ten schedule. This is going to be one of the prime games on the national schedule. It's going to settle a lot of arguments, I do believe. $173 to get in. And remember, if you download the Game Time app, which is preferred, and you use the code Buckeyes, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Hey, that gets you in for $153. Ohio State at Penn State if you make that your first purchase. And of course, terms apply to any deals when it comes to these services. But also, if you find a ticket on another ticketing service that gets you into that aisle or that area where you've already bought your ticket on gametime.co for a lesser price, or a lower price, Game Time, the Game Time app or gametime.co will refund you 110% of the difference. You bought your gametime.co ticket for $80 and you found it somewhere else for 70, you get 110% back of $10. That's pretty good. So Game Time stands by its business. And remember, download that Game Time app, use the promo code Buckeyes in your first purchase, you get $20 off. Can't beat that, can you, Spence?
Well, no, Tim, and I know that you've been personally searching for some tickets to the Lil Baby concert at Nationwide Arena on Saturday night. And when you were looking for those tickets,
Who's got two?
you looked for other places, and Game Time had the best choices for that concert. I know how big of a Lil Baby fan you are, Tim, and so when you go see Lil Baby this weekend at Nationwide Arena, you'll be doing it because you went to the Game Time app and got your tickets there.
Hallelujah. You're exactly correct. I'm not going to say whether that's true or not, but you are correct. But hey, speaking of Lil Baby, Mick Marotti, there's a segue for you. He gets some of these guys, they roll into Ohio State, and they're not little babies, but they're nothing like they end up rolling out as. I know you agree with me on that, don't you? Don't you, Spence? Yeah. Mick Marotti has got the conveyor belt going when it comes to developing the physical stature and the leadership stature of these Ohio State football players. When he speaks, they listen, correct?
Yes, for sure. He's the cart. You can't put the cart before the horse, but he's the cart. And yeah. I think, he hauls everything. You load up that wagon. He's the wagon there, I guess, because he is the one.
I'm going along with your analogy because it's kind of like stuck in mud, but I like it. Go ahead now.
He's the one that you can't get anywhere without it. You got nowhere to sit. You got nowhere to haul things. I think he's the engine, I guess, that makes this program go. Maybe I could have become a 1920s analogy rather than an 1820s analogy. But I think Mick Marotti, he's the one that gets the Ohio State Buckeyes where they want to go to.
And I think any player that rolls into Ohio State has since 2012 when he took over as a strength and conditioning coordinator, came in with Urban Meyer. Any player has found that, boy, you need to get Mick Marotti's endorsement before you have any other plans. And we get into that. I get into that with the conversation I had with him here in the height of the preseason camp. And, it's going to be hot again this week. And he has some good, not only talks about Ohio State and how they take care of these players and stuff, but also he has some good advice for youth athletes out there and youth coaches who are trying to steer clear of any problems with the heat. It's a good listen to. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Mick Marotti. Hey, Mick Marotti, we're sitting here in the middle of August. Camp is well underway. You and your staff are watching these guys like hawks from a physical standpoint. You've put in all this work since January to here with the exception of like a 3-week, not respite, but during spring drills and stuff. These guys have pretty much belonged to you and your staff. And just what's your take on this football team right now from a physical fitness standpoint?
Great question. I think we're in a good spot. I think, the hard thing is, the one thing about the game of football, it's hard to prepare for the game of football because you can't wear helmets and shoulder pads while you're training. Whereas other sports, basketball, you basically can play basketball to play basketball. So yeah. I think the off season is more for developing, speed and strength and, general conditioning and then specific conditioning based on energy systems for the game of football. But then you put the helmet on, then you put the, spiders on, then you put the shoulder pads on. It's a completely different game. And now someone's tugging on you and someone's pushing on you.
And hitting you.
And then you got a guy in your face and, you got a lot of different variables that you didn't have when you're just training. So yeah. It's hard to mimic those. You try to do the best you can, but we're in it. Now you're getting ready for, games. You got to look at the schedule. You're getting ready for the games. You're getting ready for scrimmages. You're getting ready for those practices. So a lot goes into it.
You and I've talked many times before. I mean, I cover auto racing too throughout my career, and the idea you roll onto a racetrack and you've engineered this car to be a certain way. Then it rains, or then the sun shines hotter than you thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a totally different automobile than it was that you built in the shop and you tweaked on and engineered on and made these little fine adjustments. Your job, y'all's job, it's all about those fine adjustments as the year goes on, right? I mean,
It is.
because you don't want to. You've got guys getting banged up, like you say. Flip side of it is you don't work those guys too hard. The other flip side of that is it's like a six-sided flip side. They got to be ready to play the next week. I mean, I don't know. What do you feel a pressure building at this point in the season from your vantage point? How would you describe it?
It's just, again, you use history and experience to help you through, to guide you. But you talk about heat, like, you got a big practice tomorrow. It might be 92 degrees, especially in the Midwest. When I was in the SEC, it was different because it was hot all the time and you knew it was coming. But here, like, it was 67 degrees when we started practice today. Then at the end, it got a little warmer, but like next week it's supposed to be 92.
Yeah.
So you have to be ready. You have to hydrate. You have to be rested. You have to be, have to make sure you got the nutrients in you. You got to make sure you eat. Make sure you take your heat guard. Make sure you take your electrolytes. Like all these things, you got to make sure you drink through practice and hydrate and take those breaks and get that Gatorade and get that electrolytes back in your system. Because if you don't and you're dehydrated, and the muscles don't work right, energy levels don't work right. Now all of a sudden you put yourself at risk, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah, I just think this is the weirdest sport of them all because you practicing in August when it's hot as hell, and it can be snowing in November.
Yeah.
December's going to be cold at some point, even with global warming. It's going to be cold. They're going to be challenging. It is weird to get, like I say, a team ready to face all of that just from an elemental standpoint, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's again, you're looking at the first game. You're looking at Indiana trying to get ready for September 2nd.
3:30 over there.
Yeah, and again, we've had games where it's been nice and cool. It's at night.
Right.
Not a concern with heat. Not a concern with the environment. You never know at 3:30. You never know in the Midwest. You never know. And now you're on turf. It's another 10 to 12 degrees. Just a lot of things to take into consideration. And what we try to do with the performance staff here, the athletic training staff, the sports science staff now, which is a whole nother entity that we have. You try to turn over every rock, every stone, and make sure you're as prepared as you possibly can be when you play the game. Because that's all that matters is games.
Yeah. Two quickies come out of that for me. Number one is I've been covering football for 50 years now, and I've never understood back in the day coaches who just want to work through the heat of the day to get, and heck, when I first started being around football, you weren't drinking a lot. They were taking salt tablets.
Yeah.
How far we've come, right? But I've always believed in my heart, you get more out of a team when you're practicing maybe in the cool of the early evening or something because they're not just trying to get through the practice.
Yes.
And there is that fine line, right? Because you can get a game in September, 90 degrees in Ohio Stadium. We've all seen it, but where do you draw that fine line?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword because you don't want to if you are in the heat all the time and say the game is going to be cooler, then sometimes you just wear them out.
Yeah.
But if you're the only way to get acclimated to sun and heat is to be in it. So there is a fine line. What's enough, not too much. And we try to use all of our sports science data to help make that decision or help us make that decision from a standpoint.
What is the coolest thing that's come along in the last year since you and I talked before doing this? Maybe a piece of equipment, maybe a scheme, maybe a regimen to put guys on. What just caught your eye over the last 12 months that you guys have incorporated?
I think the two coolest things. Number one, from a force plate data standpoint, where you jump on a force plate, it tells you so much that we might have seen with our eye, we might not have seen with our eye, and it gives us kind of where a guy's headed. Maybe there's something going on with them, and you can pick it up and you can kind of get in front of it. So the force plate data has been astronomical. It's been a very instrumental part of where we're at. The coolest thing is the urinal specific gravity deals where now you can pee in a urinal and it will turn red if you're dehydrated, yellow if you're on the border, and then green if you're hydrated.
Yeah.
So we turn the lights out in the bathroom and we have interns kind of marking what they see, and the whole thing lights up green. I know somebody said something about the Jaguars.
Yeah.
We were doing this back 8 months ago. So.
Yeah, but did somebody have to convince you about that technology, or did you jump on it?
No, we've been testing their urine, pee, specific gravity for 10 years now, 8 years now. So Sean Barnhouse brought it up. Hey, there's this new product. What do you think? So we did our own little anecdotal test of, what does it measure from our specific gravity test.
Yeah.
We actually do the dipstick, and then based on what the test is in the new green, red, or yellow.
Yeah.
So.
And when you get that kind of information, how long does it take you to? I would think some players jump on that new technology. Maybe some are reticent about it. How would you describe how they? Because ultimately, it's them involved.
They're pretty in tune right now. Maybe 5 years ago, 7 years ago, we'd have to keep educating them. But right now, they're in tune. Like, they want to know how fast they ran in practice. They want to know, where their body weight's supposed to be, where it's at, what happened. They want to know what they need to take. They need to know what kind of hydration, what's the best.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes they play like they know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's funny because as you're telling me the story, I'm walking off the field with the late Chico Nelson, but he was a safety here way back in I think it was the early '90s, and I'm talking to him like you and I are talking. Back then, you guys actually could walk into here.
Oh yeah.
And all of a sudden, he just fell to the ground. He had a heat cramp throughout his lower, midsection, and next thing you know, they're got an IV in him and all this kind of stuff. And is it knock on wood now, y'all? Not that that's never going to happen, but is that a rarity now with the way y'all stay on top of it?
Again, you can't prevent.
Right.
But the other cool thing we have is Kayla Olson has a patch that goes on their skin and it measures the salt, the electrolytes that leave the body throughout a practice. Because we have guys that are super heavy sweaters. And then now, once we know how much salt they've lost, we get them on a regimen of, okay, this is the product you're going to take. Every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes, we have performance liaisons with each position group. So then they know, whoever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ryan Day,
yeah.
Ryan Day, quarterback, needs to take this right stuff, solution every 30 minutes. And so, we're kind of on to, again, sometimes it's slippery. We make guys weigh in every morning. They weigh out after every practice. They all have a hydration regimen. So some guys have, high electrolytes. Some guys have just high fluid. Some guys have whatever. And again, we have people making sure that they do this throughout practice, before practice.
Yeah.
Cold tank, you guys see us in the cold tanks all the time. So we try to do as much as we can to recover them, to make sure they are hydrated, properly nutritioned, and all the things that we need to do.
Yeah, I think the cold tank is one of the great things that's ever come along.
I'm tired of fighting with guys sometimes.
Well, but still. But it is. I mean, one day, this is really funny because I just thought of this from the standpoint of covering this for a long time, is players today. I mean, preseason camp was about getting in shape when I first started covering back in '84. It really was. I mean, some guys worked out, but there was hardly any organized. There was no organized off season kind of thing and stuff. Now these guys, you let them go. You turn them over to Ryan Day. Do you still do the keys to the car kind of thing?
No, we don't. But we do a kind of a ceremony.
Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are in shape. 11 out of 12 months now? How would you describe what, and maybe not peak, but pretty close to peak? I mean, how would you describe it?
I mean, it's kind of like what I call perpetual condition. There are 23 athletes that, I mean, just like you said, when do they really get breaks?
Yeah.
They really don't. They get 3 weeks here, a week here, 2 weeks here. So you really got to be in tune with load management. You got to know what they've done, what they do. Now, back in the day, when guys would go home for spring break, you'd be worrying about them being out all night partying, whatever. Now, where their young athletes are at, we're worried about them doing too much. They all have, quarterbacks go throwing school, the wideouts are going to catch, going to work on their craft, going on their skills, DBs are going, I'm going to Florida on vacation, but I'm going to get some work done. They all take their cleats, so it's really, I mean, it's kind of flipped a little bit here in the last 10 years. So we got to worry about that. We got to make sure they don't do too much, but do enough, and you got to be in that zone.
Yeah.
Training zone.
Overwork, overuse kind of thing.
Yeah,
like with a quarterback, you can throw too many passes.
Oh, my God.
It can actually happen. Hey, before I get done here, I wanted to ask you this. I mean, there are a lot of high school coaches, players, even younger than that, who might be watching this video. And I'm just, what would be your advice to them as, obviously their games are going to be starting here any moment. But what's your advice to them to how to handle, as a team, how to handle heat situations? The stress of late August.
Yeah, great question. I think number one, athletes need to make sure they are properly hydrated, and you could tell by just when you pee, and if it's clear, and the clearer the better.
Yeah, you don't need that super gizmo.
No, you got to be careful with like caffeine and stuff, because that'll it's a diuretic. It'll dehydrate you. You got to eat. And I just know 15, 16, 17-year-old kids don't like to eat breakfast. So breakfast is the most important meal. If you are a heavy sweater, make sure you salt your food, and just if you're taking electrolytes, you're taking some sort of vitamin and mineral to help that with that.
Yeah.
Gatorade during practice, Gatorade after. Anything that has Pedialyte is another good product. Anything that has those high electrolytes in it. And just you got to hydrate. And I know kids don't hydrate enough, because our guys here, they're in shock when we make them hydrate enough and eat. And if you're not getting those 3, 4, 5 meals a day, you're. And then the other thing too is, like, when I remember back when I played high school football, I would be so geeked up, and it was hot in August, and you'd go through pregame warm up, and then you'd be kind of like spent. Like, yeah. What do you put in your body after pregame warm up? Yeah. Are you eating something with salt and, like, pretzels and Pop-Tarts? I mean, things with sugar and those things to help get you through. That's what we have in our locker room. Oranges and bananas and things that have those minerals that you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just breathing. Just calm down and take a big deep breath, and be careful where your levels are, your arousal levels.
Obviously there's been a lot of things that have gone on, good and bad, I'm talking about your profession.
Yes. Over
the last many years and stuff. What is your sense of where your profession is now? Is your sense that everybody gets it, or most people get it, understanding how far you can push things? You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
The workout, I'm not going to name names, but we know guys around the country who have run into problems. I mean, I don't know. What do you have to say about where your profession is in that regard, and do you think more and more people get it?
I think the profession's in a way better place. I think from certifications to education to continuing at CEUs, where you have to continually brush up on your education and know what's out there. And sometimes, again, you learn from situations. Yeah. We just want to continue to learn and never take anything for granted. Like, even in our off-season program, we make these kids eat before we do anything. And sometimes when people get into problems and get into trouble, they just, didn't want to eat or didn't want to drink. They ran out of gas, and then all of a sudden you got all kind of things you're dealing with. So we just want to make sure we continue to educate, stay educated, talk about these things in our profession, and really in the whole sports performance realm. The trainers and the strength coaches and the nutritionists and the sports scientists all together. And we have what we call here our athletic performance team, and then even further our high performance team, which involves those entities where we talk about everything from, ad nauseum, everything. Yeah. Just because you can't, you can't take anything for granted.
2 of the quickies, and I get out of here. What stands out to me about your profession now and the way you guys go about your business, it is very specific per athlete.
Yes.
I mean, it didn't used to be that way. I mean, well, yeah, come on, man, finish this gasser. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, you're behind. How much more specific can I get? I've asked you this before. I'm stammering because I want to make sure I word it right. You're specific to each athlete, but each athlete has maybe a limit, but maybe a place here where they don't get to the limit. That's where you're getting into now, right? Is like, well, you're not to your limit yet. You understand what I'm saying? Is it getting to that point from a fine line?
Yeah, I think individuality or individual specific training, and it's really threefold. It's the general program. It's the position specific, like the offensive linemen have a different job description. They have to do different things in a game, different things in practice than a skill player does. So you have a load barrier or load management there. And then the skill guys, again, differently. We monitor everything, so we kind of know where they're at.
Yeah.
We actually know where they're at and what their limits are, when they need to pull back a little bit, how far you can push them based on, again, and then every athlete's different. Their ceilings are different. Genetic potential's different. Athletic potential's different. Like all these different things that you got to, again, when's a guy strong enough?
Yeah.
Like, when's he too strong?
Yeah.
Does a guy really need to have 750 pounds on his back?
Yeah.
To train to play the game of football, be a great, be an athlete, and be those things. So, we have an advising team that helps us, and the current research and where we need to focus on, and it's good to have.
This isn't my last question, but I want to, because this popped in my head. Give me one guy on this team that's, I don't know, people like to use that word freak. Is there a guy on this team that you kind of go, wow, if everybody, it's not putting anybody else down.
No, I get it.
Give me a guy that just jumps out at you as like,
as a freak,
well, as in you can't even push him too hard, maybe, or his limit, his potential is such. You know what I mean? He's already pretty good, but his potential is such that there's still more to go there. I mean, it's because when you see these guys, most of the time figure they're playing at or near their limit, and but then there are guys that man, they can go a little farther. And this didn't put anybody down. I mean, a guy that you just, I guess my point is, have enjoyed bringing along.
Oh, yeah.
You know what
I
I'm
get
saying?
it. I mean, the obvious ones come to mind right away. I mean, you take a guy like Sonny Styles.
Yeah.
It's seeing where he came as a 17-year-old. Now he's able to, he's 18-year-old, whatever 18-year-olds are allowed to do nowadays. And then you see where his ceiling is. It's just you just get him, progressively take him, to each step as he goes through. So it's kind of cool.
So there's a great example. Last thing, you've been, ever since you came here with Urban Meyer, you've been involved heavily in defining leaders on this team, helping with that leadership group, etc. What do you think about this group today? I'm not necessarily getting you to name names, but what sense do you have of this team from that vantage point of, does it have the leadership in place?
I think we have a very mature group of guys that have really embraced the leadership role and really embraced being able to grow into that leadership role. So it's real. I mean, you got a lot of older guys that have played a lot of football, so it's hard to be that leader if you haven't been in it. You know what I mean? We've had some guys that got some battle scars and have been in it and have been in those highs and lows and all around. So it was pretty cool. And they did it. We have our whole programs based on leadership and leadership groups and squads, and they've done a great job. It's fun.
You're around these guys more than the coaches are. Do you sense there is a chip on their shoulder? Is that the right term? Because really, it was self-inflicted wounds that cost them. You know what I mean? So what does that chip on your shoulder mean? I'm not sure, but is there a driven factor about this team coming off of last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's driven because of the leadership. The leadership and the way they go about their business, the professionalism, the work ethic, the accountability. I mean, those things kind of help, and the young kids, the younger guys see that, and it's really cool to be around. It's a good group.
Mick Marotti, thanks for joining the Tim May Show again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Man, it's always a pleasure sitting down with Mick Marotti because he's a different kind of cat, man. He pretty much is extremely confident and tells you, and is pretty straightforward in his comments. Right, Spence?
Absolutely. He's not going to sugarcoat many things, Tim, and I don't think a strength and conditioning coach should.
Yeah. And you heard what he said about when I was asking about maybe who are some of the freakiest or most moldable, I guess, athletes that are on this football team. And the one name that immediately popped up was Sonny Styles. I mean, we've already heard Jim Knowles endorse him. Ryan Day has endorsed him that he's going to play and play a lot from the get-go this year. A safety, linebacker, cornerback, mid-range fielder, whatever they call it in soccer. He may be the fullback in soccer. It's interesting that was the name that came out of Mick Marotti's mouth, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then he was just named a starter this week. Sonny Styles named a starter by Jim Knowles, who, he knows that he's going to play a linebacker safety role. He's going to just roam around the field and make plays. And I think that's pretty telling of the Buckeyes' defensive plans. They all almost revolve around what number 6 is going to be doing out there on the field.
Yeah. Hey, last thing real quick. I wanted to ask you before we move on. What is the one thing that Ohio State needs to get done in the next 10 days to make their fans, besides naming the starting quarterback, to make their fans feel even better going into the opener where they're a prohibitive favorite at Indiana?
That's a good question because it's just so much quarterback dependent now that Ryan Day has named a lot of the starters on the offensive line and Jim Knowles named a lot of the defensive starters.
Are you buying that the cornerbacks could be elite this year? Another elite unit with Denzel Burke, Davis Enigmanos, and Jordan Hancock, just to name the top three.
Yes, yeah, I'm drinking that Kool-Aid, Tim. I think they're going to be pretty good. I think that's the back end probably is just the biggest thing. Getting that shored up, making sure you know who your starter is going to be. I think it's going to be Jihad Carter along with Lathan Ransom and Sonny Styles. But Knowles throws now Malik Hartford's name into the mix. I think he's probably even with Josh Proctor. I don't know if there's a spot for Josh Proctor in this defense, and I don't like saying that. I like Josh a lot, but I'm just not sure where he would fit into this, especially with a guy like Sonny Styles on the field. So I think it's that back end and just making sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted before you head to Indiana, because you can't go out there and start giving up big plays against that offense to open a year in which you're supposed to be much better on defense.
Yeah, I think Indiana's going to test them in all kinds of ways of what Ohio State didn't do well last year. Indiana's going to come after them. They're going to come after the new starting offensive line and quarterback. It's going to be a very, very good opening test, I do believe, from a, what do you want to call it, X's and O's standpoint. But Spencer, looking forward to it, man. We'll see you again next week. But thanks for joining the Tim May Show again, my man.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Always appreciate it.
And ladies and gentlemen, until next week, we'll see you then.